Hi, I'm John. This is my show, An American Scheme, where I'm proving that Diana Ross is Michael Jackson's actual mother.
Said you're like family. I think that people think that that's mythical, but it isn't.
Smokey Robinson said people think that it's mythical about Motown being a family, but it isn't. Okay? So when he says it isn't, let's take the words at face value. Sometimes there's actually just simple truth to what is he actually saying. That because we all think about, but you see, because he says it isn't, because we all think, well, Motown, we all understand that most of the groups that were generated through Motown came right from that area. And as they built it as a family working together, really, and they all cared about each other and lots of things, and then relationships would have developed in through the stuff and all this stuff. And that's kind of where the context of the family comes into. That's what they say. But that's the mythical thing, okay? But Smokey Robinson, in his own words right there, say, but it isn't. It isn't mythical, which means it is an actual family. And if he's talking about it being an actual family, well, now let's have that conversation. What could that conversation be? Because nobody's ever had that conversation. My story says that just after Berry Gordy met Smokey Robinson in August of 1957, a few months after that, Smokey Robinson gets Diana Ross pregnant and Michael Jackson is conceived. Okay? So then what happens is that Berry Gordy is the one who has the friendship with Joe Jackson. So Berry Gordy is the one who orchestrates this plan to get Smokey and Diana to give their child to the Jacksons. Okay, so now right there in that situation, you've got, if Smokey Robinson has a child with Diana Ross, they're actually family now. They're actually the parents of a child that actually constitutes them as family members. They're parents of a child. They're related. They're not blood relatives, but they're related through their child, a blood relative. So they're related now. They've got an actual family relation. Now, Berry Gordy, I think it's in 1971 that he has a child with Diana Ross. Okay, so Diana Ross has a child with Berry Gordy in 1971. So now, if Diana Ross has a child with Berry Gordy, and if she has a child with Smokey Robinson, then they literally are now family. They're not mythical, like he says. People think it's mythical, but it wasn't. And it wasn't because it all started off through the foundation of Motown, started off with the relationship that happened right in the beginning through this family relationship where they had to give the kid away, which I'm saying that's what the song Shop Around is about, which that's the song that builds Motown, builds the whole thing. Everything revolves around that. And then because of that, because like I'm saying, how integral, see, Michael Jackson is that kid, and that's how integral Berry Gordy would have been involved in Michael Jackson's life from basically day one. Not basically, prior to day one. He was part of Michael Jackson's life when Michael was an infant, you know? So Michael Jackson, in his subconscious mind, he would have been hearing Berry Gordy's voice and Smokey Robinson's voice. Those are voices he would have heard while he was in the belly of Diana Ross. Like, those are things that's like, you know, when you think about the later things of how everything occurred, you know, these people, like he says, they really are family and stuff. So now, let me show you a couple little pieces of this Berry Gordy talking about Michael Jackson. This would be after he died.
Yeah, I am somewhat numb. I am shocked at the passing of Michael Jackson. You know, it's like a dream, a bad dream. He was so much like a son to me. It's just hard to realize that Michael Jackson is not here. He sort of grew up under the Motown banner, and while most people think that he had no fun in his childhood, he did a lot that brought joy to him.
Let's see. So when he's saying there, like what I'm saying, that Berry Gordy's the one that was actually responsible for giving Michael to Joseph. Okay? So when he's saying people think Michael didn't have a lot of joy in his childhood, see, Berry Gordy inside of him, he feels defensive because he's responsible for giving Michael to the Jacksons. In the prior, before they're famous, and then after, there's a responsibility there that Berry Gordy feels, and you can see it in that statement there where he's explaining about, oh, Michael Jackson did have a childhood, you know. Oh, people say, no, he didn't have a childhood. Yeah, he had a childhood. And so he's telling you, like right there, that Michael Jackson, when Michael Jackson is telling you the story that I didn't have a childhood, Berry Gordy himself right there is telling you that there's something wrong with that story of what Michael's telling you, because that's not the story of what Berry is witnessing, right? Didn't Berry tell you, what the story Berry tells you here is, oh, he played with my kids. They were on the baseball team, you know, and this is after what Berry meets him, you know? So the childhood stuff before that stuff, when Michael says he didn't have a childhood, it's like, Michael, you were hanging out with all of your brothers. You were progressing through a band. You were working to become a famous band. It sure looked like he was enjoying it when you see him performing. Sure looked like a kid who was enjoying what he was doing. When you hear him speaking later in his life, he speaks upon being on the stage as where he feels most natural and how he feels so comfortable, like how he could sleep on stage. So that's all of these things about when the Michael Jackson's childhood story, it doesn't make sense. And then the people around there will tell you that's no. And then he tries to give it in the context of, I didn't have a childhood, like I didn't have any friends, I couldn't do anything. It's like, what are you talking about? You had a large family. You were constantly doing things. You had neighbors in the neighborhood, school kids. They were right there. They were doing all that stuff. He was hanging around, playing with all the kids, all the family. He had plenty enough people. Plus, he was entertained. He had things to keep him busy. He was busy all the time. He was doing all that stuff. Then he gets to Motown, and now we got Berry Gordy telling you, well, in Motown, he was hanging out with my kids. We had a baseball team. He's playing baseball with them all the time, you know, and he's telling you directly, Michael Jackson definitely had a good childhood, you know, but the thing is, Berry Gordy's taking responsibility for that because he's the one who sent him to Joseph Jackson, and he feels guilty for it, and that's why he's having to clarify that one statement, because he's involved. And then the Michael being a child of his, because why does he feel like Michael's a child? Not like the Michael Jackson that came in, would he look at that kid like that's a kid who's part of a Jackson family, but here they always reference him like, always, I feel like just like he was one of my kids. Well, the reality is that Berry Gordy was the one who was responsible for sending that baby to Joseph Jackson. Now, do you understand the context of him feeling much more like how Michael is one of his kids? He was around the whole development of Michael's life the whole time. He knew Michael was over there with Joseph. Once Joseph started doing the band, he knew that Michael had talent and that the band was being developed. He knew all that stuff was going on. Then when they come back to him, he sees all that, all the progressions of Michael being progressive into a star from what was just this little kid that he was trying to get rid of so he could get his thing going. You know, and those are the real stories, and you can tell when they speak and stuff, you can actually hear the truth in their words. But nobody will just look at the simple thing when Smokey tells you the simple truth. People think it's mythical, but it's not. It's not mythical. It's real. They are real. This is a real family. This is what happened. This is how all those stories get developed. People don't understand how stories get developed. It's like there's other stuff there. And when Smokey Robinson flat out tells you, people think it's mythical, but it's not. Maybe let's just believe him for once. And let's try and understand, well, what do you mean it's not? Let's ask him some questions about that. Let's see how he answers. There's no way he could deal with any kind of interrogation dealing with my story, because my story just rips right through him. He can't come out with these lies and these falsities that try and cover up all of what they've done. That stuff can't happen, not with my story. My story just like, boom, okay, now let me explain to you, Smokey, this is what you're actually saying. This is what I'm going to do to these people. Let me tell you, Berry Gordy, I'll tell you what you're actually saying. Let me tell you, Diana Ross, I'll tell you what you're actually saying. Don't feed me this shit that you feed the stupid, mindless public. That shit's dead. I'm here, and I will not tolerate that kind of speech anymore.